3 months after I got home from deployment, Karen got arrested in my living room, barefoot, screaming, and wearing a bathrobe with HOA President bedazzled on the back. Why? Because she stole my house while I was overseas, rented it to strangers, and forged legal documents like it was arts and crafts night. She thought I wouldn't notice. She forgot I used to track insurgents with satellite drones and run tracking her paperwork trail. I knew something was wrong before I even stepped out of the Uber. The grass was trimmed. That might not sound like a red flag, but when you've left your home with weeds tall enough to hide a raccoon and a busted sprinkler that sounded like a dying dolphin every third cycle, manicured lawn is code for someone's been here who shouldn't. The hedges were sculpted into tight little cubes, the driveway power washed, and the welcome mat had been swapped out. Ours used to say, "Come back with a warrant." There it read, "Live, laugh, lease." That was the first gut punch. The second was the Tesla, white, smug, spotless, parked like it owned the concrete it sat on. I stared at it. Not because I'm against electric cars, but because it didn't belong. The kind of didn't belong that made my hand instinctively go for my key ring like I was still clearing rooms in Fallujah. I approached slow, steady, combat slow. There was a new wind chime on the porch. My wife Hannah hated wind chimes, said they sounded like ghosts asking to borrow sugar. I reached for the doorknob just as movement flickered behind the window. Someone walked past in a t-shirt, barefoot, holding what looked like a protein smoothie. Then the music kicked in, Spotify jazz, the background kind you play when you're journaling about kombucha. Before I could knock, the door opened. A guy in his early 30s stood there like he'd been expecting a package. Flip-flops, aviators on his forehead, banana strawberry shake in a mason jar. "Hey man, can I help you?" he asked. Not rude, not nervous, just neutral, like I was a UPS guy with the wrong address. "This is my house," I said. Slow, cold, the kind of cold that means I'm not here for a debate. He blinked, tilted his head like a Labrador trying to read math. I don't think so, bro. We signed the lease last month. HOA handled everything." I pulled out the key, the same key I'd carried through 2 continents, 7 airports, and 1 IED blast. Slipped it into the lock. Didn't turn, not even a click. "Dude," he said, backing up slightly, "if you're lost or something, maybe talk to the community office. I'm just renting here." I stared at him. He had the casual tone of a man who says namaste before yelling at baristas. "Name's Tyler," he added, like that explained anything. I didn't respond. I was scanning. Inside the foyer, I could see my wife's framed deployment photo, still hanging on the wall, right above a brand new shoe rack. That photo was ours. They didn't even bother taking it down, just decorated around it. That's when the black SUV rolled up, no lights, no sirens, just quiet confidence, like a mall cop who studied real law enforcement on YouTube. The doors opened and 2 men stepped out in khakis and navy polos with tactical vests that looked like they'd been ordered off Etsy. "Community Safety Enforcement," the decals read. One had a clipboard, the other had Oakley shades he clearly didn't earn. "Sir," said the clipboard, "we're going to need you to step away from the residence. You're trespassing on a leased HOA property." "Excuse me?" I said, voice flat. "I'm not trespassing. I live here." "Not according to the lease," the Oakley said, tapping his vest like it gave him authority. And then she appeared. Karen, tan visor, clipboard the size of a surfboard, sunglasses that reflected every ounce of manufactured authority she'd built for herself. "Mr. Walker," she cooed with the tone of someone about to offer you a timeshare scam, "you weren't expected back until Q4. That's what your wife's last message said." I felt the muscle in my jaw twitch. "I was deployed," I said. "Not scheduled. And we thank you for your service." You chirped, "But under bylaw 14F, properties left unattended for over 90 days with no active lawn maintenance are eligible for provisional reassignment by the board." I turned slowly to look at Tyler, still sipping his kale-flavored betrayal. "So you rented out my home." Karen beamed like she'd won a bake sale. "We protected the community. It's not personal." I didn't answer. I just stood there, key in hand, sweat dry and cold on my back. My house, my photo, my lock, my raging for now, my silence. But not for long. I didn't move. Not when the fake security guy squared up like I was a threat to the begonias. Not when Karen began flipping through her clipboard like she was about to announce a neighborhood-wide curfew. I just stared at the house, my house, breathing in the sanitized scent of lemon cleaner and HOA tyranny. Tyler stood frozen behind the screen door, smoothie halfway to his mouth, unsure whether he should sip or run. Karen stepped closer, the kind of deliberate step you see before a small-town mayor cuts a ribbon or ruins someone's life. "Now, Mr. Walker," she said, teeth bared in that Stepford smile, "I understand this must be disorienting, but you have to understand, we followed procedure. Per Article 14F, you failed to maintain visual standards and provided no direct contact with the board for over 90 days. As such, the home was placed under provisional occupancy for community stabilization." She said it like she'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Probably had. I let the silence hang. Karen hated silence. People like her always did. She thrived on being the loudest rule in the room. I turned to the clipboard goon on my left. "Did you confirm with anyone in the military about my deployment?" He blinked. "We're not obligated to communicate with external entities unless the resident files a formal exemption." I pulled up my phone, scrolled, found the PDF waiver I'd emailed 4 months ago. "Right here, sent to your office on June 3rd, digital timestamp verified." Karen leaned in, lips pursed. "Oh, yes. I remember now. That email went to our old inbox. We transitioned systems in July." I stared at her. "You transitioned systems, so now you can pretend I never contacted you?" She gave a half shrug. "Clerical mix-ups happen, Mr. Walker. But regardless, the home is now under tenant contract. If you'd like to appeal, you're welcome to attend the next board hearing." "When's that?" I asked. "Next month," she replied, like she was offering me concert tickets to a show I'd never asked for. Then she nodded at Tyler. "In the meantime, our current resident will continue contributing to the community." Tyler waved weakly, like a man caught holding someone else's baby. That's when I saw it. Inside the window, just above the shoe rack, a photo of Hannah and me taken at our anniversary picnic 2 years ago, still in its original frame, but something was taped over the glass, a sticky note, bright pink, handwritten, "For staging only, remove before lease renewal." My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't just my photo. That was my life reduced to set dressing, like we were props in some sick suburban play. Karen followed my gaze, but didn't flinch. Our decor team left some legacy items we'd figured it added authenticity. Potential renters respond well to warmth. "Warmth," I said, voice dropping. "You mean my family?" "It's not personal," she repeated. That phrase again. She wielded it like a shield, like if she said it enough times, it would erase the fact that she had erased us. The clipboard guy stepped forward, hand hovering near a stun gun holster that was probably just for show. "Sir, I'm going to ask you again to vacate the premises." I looked at him, really looked, the way I used to assess hostile intel, measure distance, calculate angles. "Or what?" I asked. "You'll shoot me with HO regulations?" He didn't answer. Karen did. "Let's not escalate this. You've had a long trip. I'm sure a motel can accommodate you and your family for now. And again, we thank you for your service." That last part was delivered with a smirk of someone who prints flags on paper napkins and thinks that counts as patriotism. I turned away before I said something I couldn't unsay. Walked back to the curb, sat in the rental car, and let the silence scream. Behind me, wind chimes clinked like distant applause. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I sat there for 20 minutes, staring at that perfect little house with its HOA-approved welcome mat and its fake peace. The porch light flickered on, a smart bulb programmed by someone who thought they belonged here. I watched Tyler water my flowers. He over-watered them, and then go inside like he'd leave there for years. And just when I thought I'd leave, my phone buzzed. A name popped up I hadn't seen since Helmand Province. Just one word in the message. "You ready?" I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I knew this wasn't over. Because Karen had just mistaken silence for surrender. And that was her first mistake. Her second? Thinking I came home alone. We didn't talk much during the drive. Hannah sat beside me, hands clenched on her lap, her eyes locked on the passing strip malls and gas stations like she was trying to memorize a world that had gone sideways. Liam in the back seat kept his hoodie up and earbuds in, even though I knew the music wasn't playing. He just didn't want to hear us, or the silence between us. We pulled into the Highland Motel off I-30, the kind of place that still advertised color TV and had a vending machine that only sold RC Cola. The front office smelled like Lysol and lost dreams. The guy at the desk didn't even blink when I showed him my military ID, just handed over the key like this was routine. Maybe it was. Maybe we weren't the first family to be HOA'd into homelessness. The room was clean-ish. One queen bed, two creaky chairs, and a nightstand that looked like it had survived a bar fight. I dropped our duffel next to the heater, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my boots like they might walk themselves back home without me. Liam didn't speak, just curled into the corner of the bed like a soldier in a foxhole. Hannah stood by the window, arms crossed. "You okay?" she asked finally. I shook my head. They didn't even move our photo, just slapped a sticky note on it like we're background noise. She didn't respond, and that silence stung more than words, because we'd done everything right, served, saved, paid, and still ended up here. 3 people crammed into a motel room that charged extra for towels. That's when I pulled out the laptop, not for Netflix. I wasn't Googling how to sue an HOA. I was Googling how to dismantle a cartel with a zip drive and a Wi-Fi hotspot. I started with the HOA charter. 64 pages of bylaws, appendices, and footnotes written in a dialect I call legalese, passive-aggressive. It took 2 hours to find the clause Karen had weaponized. 14F subsection C. Properties deemed non-contributive to visual or environmental standards for a period exceeding 90 days may be reassigned to provisional board control pending occupancy. That sounded technical until you realized what it meant. If you don't mow your lawn while deployed, they get to play landlord. The PDF metadata showed something even juicier. The clause was inserted into the document after my deployment began, 3 weeks after to be exact, time-stamped by a user named Cunderwood Admin. The same Karen who stood on my porch and told me it wasn't personal. It was personal enough to backdate a rule just to steal my house. Karen hadn't just mowed my lawn, she'd paved over the lawn. I stepped outside to get air, but the motel air wasn't much better. It smelled like bleach and broken promises. I walked to the vending machine, fed it $1, and stared at the soda spinning inside like it had somewhere better to be. Then I spotted him. One of the HOA fake guards, the younger one, the one with the Oakleys, standing by a pickup truck, laughing on his phone. I kept my distance. "Yeah, the guy showed up early," he said, chuckling. "Total meltdown, thought he was going to go full Rambo." Pause. "Nah, Karen handled it. Said he checked out of the neighborhood the moment he left the airport." My jaw clenched. That wasn't just policy, that was a hit. I stepped forward, quiet. He didn't see me until I was 6 feet away. His face paled. "You stalking us now?" he said, trying to sound casual, but already sweating through his collar. I stared him down. "You tell Karen that if she's going to quote me, she can try doing it to my face next time." He opened his mouth, maybe to deny, maybe to run, but I'd already turned my back and walked away. I wasn't interested in his excuses. I was interested in something else, proof, because this wasn't just personal anymore, it was strategic. And Karen had just declared war in a language I speak fluently. When I got back to the motel, Liam was asleep. Hannah sat at the tiny table thumbing through a folder of old mortgage papers. She didn't look up when I entered. "We'll fight this," I said. She nodded, but her voice was quiet. "With what? We've got a PDF and a prayer." I sat across from her, pulled up the HOA board roster, and smiled. "Not just that. We've also got something Karen doesn't." She looked up. "What?" I leaned in. "A team that actually fought for this country. And they still owe me beers. Because tomorrow, I wasn't calling a lawyer, I was calling backup. They started showing up just before dawn. No horns, no chest bumps, no war cries, just quiet boots on gravel and the occasional nod. We met at an abandoned vape shop across the street from the HOA clubhouse. I'd rented the place under a fake LLC 3 days earlier, just in case this turned into something bigger. Inside, the walls still reeked of fake mango, but the table in the back now held a satellite map, 3 laptops, an armload of HOA documents, and 6 mugs of gas station coffee strong enough to bring down a horse. Ramos arrived first, still built like a battering ram, still swearing like a preacher on his 4th divorce. "So this is the war room, huh?" he muttered, tossing a duffel on the floor. "Smells like teen lawsuit." Davis and Bowen followed, carrying 2 Pelican cases labeled audio and not audio. Yates came last, already booting up a Signal interceptor like it was just another Monday. Then Reed walked in. He hadn't said a word to me since Afghanistan, just gave a short nod and dropped a camo-wrapped GoPro on the table. No ranks, he said, no regrets. That was all I needed to hear. We divided roles like we used to. Quick, sharp, no wasted time. Bowen and Yates were on digital, server tracking, camera reroutes, IP tracebacks. Davis and Ramos handled field ops, decoy contact, HOA office access, community recon, which basically meant pretending to walk dogs while eavesdropping. Reed and I ran narrative control. We weren't just going to fight this in court. We were going to control the story. Every camera we wore was legal. Every mic, every public interaction recorded. No weapons, no gear that could be construed as threat. Just a bunch of concerned neighbors with Wi-Fi and trust issues. Karen thought this was a zoning dispute. She had no idea she'd triggered a tactical reunion. We weren't armed, but we were dangerous. And we didn't bring guns. We brought GoPros and grudges. Our first recon target was the HOA's internal meeting logs. Bowen broke into their cloud storage using an admin login we scraped from a calendar invite Karen accidentally shared on a neighborhood bulletin board. The same invite had her cat's birthday and a Zoom link titled Bylaw Update Spruce Lane Problem. That Spruce Lane problem? That was me. The PDF Bowen downloaded showed something even dirtier. 6 properties tagged under 14th, all belonging to deployed veterans, disabled residents, or people undergoing long-term medical treatment. Karen had been running a quiet little conquest campaign, seizing houses that couldn't fight back, flipping them to a rental pipeline through a shell company called Prescott Holdings, LLC. I didn't even blink, just circled every address and said, we take them all back. Karen wasn't running a neighborhood. She was running a slow-motion home invasion. That afternoon, we scoped Tyler's daily routine. He left the house at 10:30 a.m. with a yoga mat and oat milk latte. Ramos trailed him to a local gym where Mindful HIIT was happening next to a juice bar called Warrior Squeeze. Meanwhile, Davis slipped into the HOA office during yoga hour and scanned the master lease transfer log, found 11 entries, approved without proper board quorum. At least 7 were tied to Karen's signature. The best part? One was forged. Yates matched the stylus pressure and writing angle. It had been copied from a public document, then faxed to the city office from Karen's home printer. Forgery? Ramos asked. No, I said. Sloppiness. She didn't think anyone would look because until now, no one ever did. Karen out here running an HOA cartel and thinking she's still the PTA treasurer. That night, we met back at the vape shop. Hannah brought sandwiches and that look she always wore before hurricane hit. Liam stayed outside, petting Max, our service dog, who'd been trained to sense stress. Max hadn't stopped pacing all day. You sure this doesn't go too far? Hannah asked. I nodded. We're not burning our house down. We're just lighting up the lie. Reed stepped forward, unrolled a new map, a full layout of the neighborhood, highlighting HOA surveillance zones, entry points, and blind spots. Phase 1, he said, visibility, make her think we're just watching. Phase 2, data. We publish every forgery, every fake clause, every illegal tenant file. Phase 3, he paused, public consequence. And Phase 4, Davis asked. I looked at them all. We don't stop until she's not just removed. We make sure Karen becomes a verb. Because when HOA becomes war, you fight like it's home. And we were just getting started. The next morning, Karen struck back. We hadn't even posted the first evidence packet yet when a knock landed at our motel room like a legal grenade. A courier handed me a manila envelope stamped, urgent cease and desist. Inside, 4 pages of OHOA letterhead jargon accusing me of unlawful surveillance, harassment, unauthorized use of proprietary community materials, and my personal favorite, threatening the visual serenity of the neighborhood. They even cited Max for excessive barking in a non-designated emotional support animal zone. I half laughed, half choked. Ramos read the letter and muttered, "Man, she hit you with the HOA Geneva Convention." Hannah didn't laugh. "This is bait," she said. "She wants you to overstep." She was right. But Karen underestimated one thing. I don't flinch from paperwork. I weaponize it. Karen had just fired the first shot in a paper war. Bad move. I read contracts like other people read cereal boxes. 2 hours later, Ramos was pulled over on his way to pick up surveillance gear, twice. First for a suspicious vehicle loitering near community assets, then for failure to display HOA parking credentials. He didn't even live in the neighborhood. The second time, a plainclothes process server handed him a temporary restraining order signed by a county judge, Karen's cousin. It accused Ramos of verbal intimidation and aggressive standing. The footage on his body cam showed him silently scrolling on his phone beside a mailbox. "She just sidelined me," Ramos said, fists clenched. "That's a flank shot. Classic HOA ambush." "You're not benched," I told him. "You're strategic now. We adapt, we rotate, but make no mistake, this is Karen trying to bleed us out through bureaucracy. Karen's playing chess, but only if the pieces are made of subpoenas and the boards laminated." Meanwhile, Karen escalated her media game. We intercepted a neighborhood newsletter titled "Community Alert, Potential Threats to Peace." It included a blurry photo of me standing on my own sidewalk, cropped to look like I was yelling. The caption, "Disgruntled former resident exhibiting hostile behavior." She even included a quote from an anonymous concerned tenant saying, "I had the eyes of a man who owns too many knives." We tracked the IP sent from Karen's desktop at 9:03 p.m. Subtlety wasn't her weapon of choice, smear campaigns were. But she'd crossed a line. Because that's when I opened the folder Hannah had quietly built over the past few nights. Mortgage receipts, email threads, photos of Liam in the yard dated and geotagged. Proof that this wasn't abandonment. This was theft. You can call me disgruntled all you want. I still have the deed, the dog, and the digital trail. But the worst came later that evening. A letter from the military housing liaison appeared in my inbox. "Cold, clinical, and devastating. Concerns have been raised regarding your post-deployment conduct and potential instability tied to community complaints. An internal review is being initiated." That one stopped me cold. Because Karen hadn't just tried to steal my house, she was coming after my record. After everything I'd fought to keep clean, I stared at the screen until it blurred. Then Hannah walked over, placed her hand on my shoulder, and whispered, "She's not afraid of what you'll do. She's afraid of what you'll prove." That's when I stopped playing defense. We weren't just taking her house back, we were taking her down. That night, we launched Phase 2. Davis uploaded a teaser video to a private link, 30 seconds of Karen caught on HOA camera saying, "If he comes back, we'll make sure it doesn't feel like home anymore," paired with footage of her shredding a deployment notice and giggling with that fake HOA guard. It hit like napalm. No names, not yet, but enough for the neighborhood to start buzzing. By sunrise, the views hit 80,000, shared on vet forums, HOA complaint groups, even a local news subreddit. Karen had tried to bury me in paperwork, but she forgot the first rule of any war. Never give the underdog a reason to dig, because once you do, they don't just uncover the truth, they expose it. And we were just getting warmed up. By noon, the teaser had done its job. Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting, but not before sending out a frantic email blast to the neighborhood. "Do not engage with defamatory media. False actors are attempting to smear your board and destabilize our peaceful community." She signed it in service, like she was the Mother Teresa of mulch regulations, but we'd already cracked the dam. People weren't just watching the video, they were sharing stories. First came a message from a retired airman down the block, then a former ER nurse, then an elderly couple on Alder Lane who'd been fined $600, 0 cents for leaving a flag up past sundown. All of them had one thing in common: Karen. And suddenly, her kingdom of trimmed hedges and passive-aggressive signage wasn't so quiet anymore. Karen called us false actors. We called her the Wizard of HOAs, pulling levers, hiding behind a curtain, and terrified we pulled it back. We pushed the second wave that evening, a full expose, time-stamped emails, leaked meeting recordings, a voice memo of Karen laughing. They always thank him for his service until they see the grass. The neighborhood group chat imploded. One neighbor, Greg from Lot 14, started live streaming from his lawn chair, calling it the HOA Hunger Games. We didn't need a lawyer, we had Reddit. By midnight, Karen down trended in a Texas Veterans forum. The video crossed 500,000 views. I woke up to an inbox full of HOA horror stories, offers from journalists, and one message from a woman in California: "You're doing what we all wish we had the courage to." Karen had ruled with bylaw and fear. But now the bylaws were public and the fear wasn't ours anymore. Karen panicked. At 3:14, IEMing Bowen's motion sensor pinged. On the porch cam, Karen, in slippers, holding a flash drive, Redford. Her silent partner was right behind her with a crowbar and a duffel. They thought we were asleep. We weren't. Hannah and I watched in real time from the motel. They went straight for Liam's room, opened drawers, rifled through keepsakes until they found a locked tin inside. Backup copies of every document, labeled and laminated. Karen snapped. She threw it against the wall and screamed something we couldn't hear, but Max barked from the motel as if he knew she'd crossed another line. Then came the sirens. Police rolled up fast. Karen tried to run. Redford froze. It was over before it started. She said we didn't belong here, but she got arrested barefoot in our foyer with her HOA badge still clipped to her bathrobe. The arrest was beautiful in its simplicity. Karen sobbed in the cruiser, mascara smeared, yelling about conspiracies and coups, military intimidation tactics. Redford tried to lawyer up on the spot. Didn't work. Cops had it all. Entry logs, the video, the motive. Neighbors watched from their porches, some filming, others clapping. Mrs. Delaney stood at the edge of her yard, cane in one hand, coffee in the other, and said loud enough for the whole street to hear, "I told her not to poke that bear." Someone else yelled, "We should have HOA'd her years ago." I didn't say a word, just stood across the street in uniform pants and a shirt that still smelled like aircraft fuel and watched the neighborhood reset itself in real time. Back at the motel, Liam was still asleep, wrapped in all the blankets like a bunker. Hannah handed me a cup of vending machine coffee, then the newspaper someone had slid under our door. Front page, HOA president arrested in alleged housing scam targeting deployed veterans. I sipped and let it settle. We had the house back, but I knew this wasn't the end, because in the footage from the HOA meetings, there was one detail no one else noticed. One man always in the back, gray suit, polished shoes, smiling like he owned the place, because maybe he did. And that smile, that was a warning. Karen wasn't the queen. She was just the pawn, and the game had just begun. I watched that meeting clip 27 times before it clicked. The man in the gray suit wasn't just a board attendee. He never spoke, never looked at the camera, but he was always there, hovering behind Karen, whispering just before every vote, nodding right before every decision that bent the rules just enough to be legal, but slimy. Hannah spotted it first. "That's not just some board member," she said. "That's Howard Redford." I stared at the screen, pulse rising. Howard frickin' Redford, retired colonel, my old CO from Kandahar, the same man who once gave a speech about integrity while demoting a soldier for sneezing during inspection. Apparently, when he left the military, he didn't lose the taste for control. He just traded uniforms for business suits and built an empire out of HOA loopholes and silence. Karen filed the complaints, but Redford wrote the script, and he'd been running this HOA like a black ops real estate syndicate. Digging into Redford was like peeling drywall. Behind every layer was something moldy. He didn't officially sit on the board, but he owned Prescott Holdings, LLC, the shell company used to lease abandoned properties from HOA districts across the state. He was the financial arm. Karen was the public face. Together, they weren't just taking my house, they were flipping dozens, all under the same tactic: target veterans, long-term hospitalized owners, and the elderly. Properties whose owners couldn't show up to defend them in person. It wasn't just dirty, it was systemic. Predatory patriotism, weaponized bylaws. And Redford? He'd crafted a clause himself, Section 19B, redeployment clause for community health preservation. Filed 2 months after I deployed. Sounded official, legal, respectable, until you realize it was just a fancy way of saying, if you're not here, we take your keys. He'd weaponized absence, punished duty, turned the American flag into a deed seizure for him. That same day, Amanda and Leo, the couple who'd unknowingly rented our home, showed up at the motel. I expected anger. Instead, Amanda held out a tablet. "We didn't know," she said, "but now we do." The tablet showed email threads. Karen had told them the house was foreclosed, that the previous owner had psychological instability post-deployment and had abandoned it without notice. They were charged above market rent, told the excess went to veteran property rehabilitation fees. None of it existed. Leo pulled out a second folder. 6 more addresses, 6 more veterans. One had died in service, His home was reassigned within 60 days. His parents never knew it had been leased. For the first time in weeks, I had to sit down. This wasn't about a house anymore. This was looting on a battlefield nobody saw, and they were doing it with clipboards. We ran it all through Bowen's server, email signatures, lease agreements, fake court notices. One name popped up on every transfer: Edgar L. Monroe. HOA treasurer, ex-real estate broker, and a known associate of Redford. He signed every illegal lease, every clause approval, every false notice. He hadn't attended a single public board meeting in 2 years, but his name was on every property reassignment Karen pushed through. He's the banker. Bowen said Redford builds the system, Monroe launders it. It wasn't just HOA corruption, it was racketeering. And now we had the receipts. We didn't go to the cops. Not yet. We went to the people. That night we held a pop-up town hall in Mrs. Delaney's driveway. Projector, speakers, full-screen breakdown of Redford's scheme. Half the neighborhood showed up with folding chairs, popcorn, and fury. The air was electric. Someone yelled, "So we've been paying dues to fund their scam?" Another shouted, "Let's vote to dissolve this whole damn HOA." Another shouted, "Let's vote to dissolve this whole damn HOA." Anna took the mic. Steady, calm, terrifying. They thought you wouldn't notice, that you wouldn't care, that they could chip away your rights under the banner of neighborhood pride. She paused, then looked straight at the camera. They were wrong. A petition to dissolve the HOA hit 80% signatures by midnight. A second petition to indict Monroe had 400 comments and counting. As the crowd dispersed, one man stayed behind. Vietnam vet, property owner for 37 years, quiet until now. He walked up to me, shook my hand, and said, "They came for us with bylaws. Let's go back at them with history." I nodded, because now it wasn't just my war, it was ours. And as I looked down at the folder in my hand, marked Unit 73, Do Not File, with Redford's name scrawled across the corner, I realized we'd only cracked the surface, because whatever they were hiding under that title, it wasn't just another stolen house. It was a bunker, and tomorrow we were going in. We found Unit 73 on a zoning map that hadn't been updated since 2011, buried deep beneath what used to be the HOA's model home, a storm shelter, concrete lind, sealed off after a minor structural issue, according to a dusty PDF hidden in a county archive. But someone had been inside recently. Power records showed a spike 2 weeks before our return. Cameras off, AC on, quiet, private, like a panic room for secrets. Redford's name wasn't listed anywhere officially, but one corner of the map was marked in black ink, board assets, Do Not Disturb. So naturally, we disturbed it. At 4:30 IMing, I walked through that old lawn with Ramos at my side, gloves, bolt cutters, no flashlights, no sound, just us, the crickets, and a padlock that had no idea its career was ended. Karen had her clipboard, Redford had his colossus, but we had bolt cutters and bad history. The hatch creaked open like it hadn't breathed in years. Inside, 4 metal crates, a rusted desk, and a shoebox labeled in red marker, Do Not Destroy, legal copy. The air smelled like mildew and cowardice. We cracked open the crates first, boxes of forged rental agreements, fake board votes, bylaw revision drafts with tracked edits still visible. Every document signed by Monroe or proxy signed by Karen. But it was the shoebox that shut Ramos up. Inside, thumb drives, surveillance logs, HOA security cam footage from properties we hadn't even known were targeted, and on top, a note in Karen's handwriting, "He'll dig. If he finds this, we're done." She was right, and she was already in jail. The deeper we dug, the more it smelled like legal arson, and Karen left the gasoline and the match right there in the box. Walked that entire folder into the state attorney's office myself, no appointment, no suit, just a go bag full of receipts and a flag-folded uniform I hadn't touched since the day I came home. The clerk tried to send me the records. I handed her the note. Tell him it's time. 48 hours later, Karen was rearrested, this time for racketeering, fraud, and obstruction. Monroe was indicted the same day. Redford tried to vanish, but the paper trail Bowen traced led straight to a real estate holding firm with federal contracts. Contracts now frozen, pending investigation. They tried to fight it, claimed mismanagement and clerical confusion, but the video didn't lie, and neither did the neighbors. At the sentencing hearing, Karen represented herself. Hair flat, voice shrill, ranting about military vendettas and weaponized patriotism. The judge listened patiently, then hit her with 8 years and $2,300,000, 0 cents in civil restitution. Her lawyer had dropped her 2 weeks earlier, unpaid. They seized her car, her condo, and the HOA's entire budget, redistributed across 19 affected homeowners, including us. I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. Some people you don't watch fall, you just make sure they don't get back up. Back at home, the porch light flickered on again, this time triggered by Max, who slept on the step like he finally felt peace. Hannah watered the garden. Liam set up his telescope. I sipped coffee and finally exhaled. Local news ran a headline, Ho-Ho Queen loses crown and her house twice. Reddit turned Karen's mugshot into a meme. Violation 14 FC, crying in court is not a valid appeal. And just when I thought it was over, the mailbox rattled. A small envelope, no return address. Inside, a key, rusted, old, labeled B2, along with a note written in block letters, "You won this one." But the board was just a branch. That's when the cold returned. Not fear, focus. Because Redford wasn't just building HOAs. He was building networks. And if B2 was where I thought it was, connected to a development in Arizona where 3 more vets had reported property reassignment, then this wasn't over. It wasn't even close. I turned the key in my hand and smiled. Karen was in prison. Redford was running. But there were others, and this time I wasn't just reclaiming a home. I was hunting down every boardroom tyrant hiding behind a flag. One by one. Clipboard by clipboard. Let's see who answers when I knock next. Sometimes the biggest battles don't happen overseas. They unfold right in your front yard, led by people holding clipboards instead of rifles. Karen thought a deployment meant disappearance. Redford thought paperwork could erase principles. But here's the thing. When you mess with someone who's trained to fight for what's right, don't be surprised when they show up with receipts instead of rage. This wasn't just about a house. It was about boundaries, dignity, and reminding the world that Ocho doesn't stand for harass our Americans. So if you've ever been bulldozed by bureaucracy or buried under bad bylaws, speak up, stand firm, and bring a flash drive, because justice may not come easy, but when it lands, it's louder than any wind chime Karen ever hung. Drop your wildest HOA story in the comments, hit like if you've ever mowed your own lawn, and share this with someone who needs back.